Inflation, I think, is a problem not just in Kenya but across East Africa, and that seems to be putting pressure on service providers to raise calling rates. Now, this is ironic because less than a year ago, some of those rates, especially in Kenya, were cut significantly due to a mandate set by the regulator and also just basic competitiveness in the system.
I think that's correct. When you're looking at what has been happening right now in Kenya and in Uganda, inflation has significantly gone up. For example, you're looking at year-on-year inflation is about 21% in Uganda, and as a result of increasing operating costs, which are your network costs, and obviously your sales, general and admin costs. The biggest component there will be payroll. So operators have to come in and adjust the salaries of their employees. They also have to recover the cost of fuel. So we've seen about 4 telecoms in Uganda increasing their tariffs. Although we've seen in the past they've been reducing those prices, but right now the economic environment has basically changed, and therefore they have to act if they have to save their profitability. I
don't know if it's across the board, but certainly in Kenya the CCK made it a mandatory price slashing in the last few months. What does that mean for the current environment in which they're operating?
I think when you look at the regulator, when they're setting prices in any economy, they're basically looking at affordability to the ordinary man on the street. But obviously, one thing that they normally look at is the mobile termination rates, which is basically the fee that each operator has to pay across to the next operator if a call is terminated in their network. Obviously, that acts as sort of like a precedent for them to reduce tariffs. But then if the environment changes to where it is right now, then the regulator also has to step in, because these operators have to recoup money for the investments, and they also still have to employ people. So the regulator might actually come back and then say, okay, we understand the environment has changed, we understand your costs are going up, but this is the level to which you will set your tariffs. But one important aspect will be what will then happen if the inflation goes down. Obviously, I'm sure as part of the agreement, the operators will then have to say if the economic environment improves, they'll have to lower the tariff.
Let's talk about the wisdom that informs those regulators, because again, using Kenya as an example, we've seen the CCK needing to level the playing field for smaller operators and some of the big players like Safaricom, and there they've either cancelled 3G licenses or reduced 3G licenses for smaller players. So there is this huge attempt to promote more investment and competition in the sector. How is that faring?
I think for now it's basically been working okay. We've seen in Kenya, Orange just recently launched a 3G network. Obviously, what the regulator will be looking at is the operators who come into the market at a later stage compared to the first mover. They obviously need to get those licenses at a lower cost. But at the end of the day, they cannot give that license for free. But then they have to balance, because you have existing operators, for example, like Safaricom, who will be saying we've already paid a very high cost to acquire that license. So if you basically give a lower charge to the new coming operator, then he can offer his products and services at a very low cost compared to the existing operator. So it's a fine balance that the regulator has to strike. But then for now, it's basically been working well. We know Airtel has the license, but they haven't launched their 3G network, and we're expecting them to be launching the network this year.
What are the trends in other East African countries in terms of regulators really trying to level the playing field as well, trying to remove those barriers to entry?
I think you basically look at it just from a licensing framework. We've recently seen in Rwanda, where the government has licensed their Bati Airtel to operate a 2G and 3G network in Uganda, which brings the total countries of operation for Airtel in Africa to about 17. I think it's a step towards liberalizing the market, because in Rwanda you had MTN that was operating, it had about 73% market share. So right now you're probably seeing the regulator also saying for the service to be affordable, you also need to introduce a bit of competition, but that competition also does not have to erode industry profitability.
What's exciting in the space? Because we're told in general, data services are starting to really drive the earnings of mobile operators, smartphones. The uptake's really high in Western Europe and other sorts of economies like that. And traffic is 2/3 within smartphones and data services. I get the sense it's not quite the situation in Africa.
I think for Africa right now, we are almost getting there. We have seen, like, for example, in Kenya, where Safaricom reduced their prices on data to try and make the service affordable. But then when you're looking at data, obviously there has to be some relevant local content for the people to be excited to use probably some applications or access some products online. So what we need to see right now is we need to see operators introducing relevant local content so that at least for the local people, there can be relevant information that they can get from the networks. For example, we can probably have agricultural information services on the networks. But for now, it's obviously starting to tick up. the operators obviously have to be aggressive in terms of subsidizing devices, because at the moment the devices are quite expensive. When you look at smartphones, they are costing more upwards of $150 in economies where the per capita GDP is below 800. So obviously it is a fine balance that operators have to strike, because obviously handsets also, they will dilute your margins. But I think we're almost getting there, but it is a good start for now.
I like the word affordability, because also that's probably the biggest barrier to internet penetration and growth in this particular area. Even though we're seeing a lot more investments in undersea cables and trying to improve on broadband, people are still not taking it up because of those costs. So even if operators embark on a subsidization strategy, there's still the cost that the user has to incur, and it seems as though many African consumers are reticent. So is voice the only leading direction for Africa?
I think for now it has been voice, but I think we've seen obviously the low-hanging fruit has been picked already. So it's now for operators to be innovative in terms of how they can offer the devices. You're correct to basically say that some of the customers have to pay upfront for the cost, because most of the customers there is prepaid in the networks. So what you basically have to do at that point, you probably maybe to look at operators getting cheaper, probably Chinese-made handsets, but obviously you can see in markets like Kenya, where the regulators basically been telling operators to switch off any fake or replica handsets that are on the networks, because obviously that kills innovation from the handset makers. But obviously for now, one thing that we'll be looking at is to say for operators, they can probably come in with an entry-level handset, which basically a feature phone which can have a color screen or something like that, because obviously you don't want to introduce big high-cost handsets like probably BlackBerry or iPhone. But I think right now we're probably getting in the right direction.
I think what's revolutionized the space in East Africa is mobile banking transfers. That seems to have really taken off in that part of Africa. That synergy between banks and mobile operators doesn't seem to exist in other parts of the continent, just thinking of Southern Africa. What lessons can we learn from East Africa?
I think it's all about how you position your product, and obviously it has to do with the distribution of how you distribute the product. Because right now, if you look probably in Kenya, it was because Safaricom had the widest distribution network with agencies across, and you also had most of the customers buying into the platform, because you can easily use it, for example, to pay for your groceries. You can use it in store. You can use it to pay for bills. So once operators start to move in that direction, they probably need to get to a level where people actually have to be comfortable with using the platform, and they also have to get a lot of facilities that people can use on the platform. For example, be it paying bills, be it paying water. So it's one of those things where the operators themselves have to be innovative and make it very relevant for the people to be excited about it.